Welcome to Movielover22, the show that isn't afraid of the dark, except when it's home alone. This week we're talking about the 1994 movie In the Mouth of Madness, directed by John Carpenter, written by Michael DeLuca, and starring Sam Neill. I'm going to spoil this movie because that's what a movie review is. Duh. We're 7 episodes in now, so I guess you're stuck with me. Well, at least I'm having a good time, and that's the point. In the Mouth of Madness is about John Trent, an insurance investigator being hired by a publication company to find a missing horror writer, Sutter Kane. Convinced the disappearance is a hoax, he sets out to discover the truth and is led to the very real town of Hobbs End, a supposedly fictional town right out of Kane's writings. First things first, I'd like to bring up one of the messages from you guys. You guys have been super supportive so far. Who am I kidding? The season hasn't aired yet, and you've said nothing. On a real note, I've had a lot of fun putting this show together. And if you're listening to this, 7 episodes in, I'm absolutely thrilled if you're enjoying it too, because that's the whole point. Just some people enjoying good movies. Okay, time to slip back into my normal guy podcasting persona. This is one of my favorite John Carpenter flicks. It truly is. It's a hit through and through. Although prolific reviewers gave it mixed and not great reviews when it was released, claiming it was too confusing. I get that, but I also argue that there are great movies where you get much more enjoyment out of them on their second viewing. American Psycho is one of them. I also believe that there are people who watched the movie and expected the entire movie to be exposited to them in a word vomit from a side character. Instead, we get clever and humorous foreshadowing, absurdity, and slimy tentacular creatures. I also think it's hilarious, so that's a plus. The movie was made in 1993 and 1994, a tribute to the works of H.P. Lovecraft, even in its title reflecting Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, and insanity is a common theme in Lovecraft's work. The titles of all of Sutter Kane's books are also all derived from Lovecraft's titles. The script was originally offered to Carpenter, who refused it, and it went to Mary Lambert, who is of little importance to me, except for the original Pet Sematary movies, and Tony Randall. Let me just say that Carpenter finally accepted the project, and he's definitely the best person for the job. The movie was made for $8 million and grossed $8.9 million, makes it pretty much a box office failure. The movie generally has mixed reviews, with some people claiming too confusing, that it doesn't fully deliver on its promise. And then there are people like me who believe the movie accomplishes exactly what it sets out to do, and it's either understated or holds back in very intentional ways. Carpenter himself has a small cameo in the film. When Trent, in the beginning of the movie, is put in the mental institution and shouts, "I'm not insane," the camera pans over and briefly catches Carpenter yelling, "Me neither." I'm a fan of cameos, except when M. Night does it, then it's kind of forced. Quentin Tarantino's cameos can be a little forced too, but that's because he can't act. Although I do like his side stuff as Mr. Brown and Jimmy. I take it back. I like him in From Dusk Till Dawn, so I'm putting my own foot in my mouth. Let's talk about the cast. Sam Neill as John Trent. Sam Neill is, of course, Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park. He also starred in Possession, The Hunt for Red October, and Event Horizon. One of the things I really enjoy about Sam Neill is that he's talented enough that I don't only see him as Dr. Grant. His roles are diverse enough that John Trent is John Trent and Captain Borodin is Borodin. John Trent is half an everyman. He's a some people kind of guy because he's not some every guy can do this, but he has that skeptic side of him that we all would have if we had encountered this kind of scenario. It makes the movie a lot of fun because as Linda dives into the world of Sutter Kane and attempts to draw Trent in, he remains stuck in the mud, cemented in reality, eager to drive out of Hobbs End as many times as it takes to break free of the madness. Julie Carmen is Linda Stiles. Julie was also the main villainous vampiress in Fright Night Part 2, which is also worth checking out. Linda is kinda creepy. Like, she has her human moments, which are fun, like when she's sleeping and John wakes her up to that squeaky toy horn and she's really angry about it, or when he tries to ask her out on a date and she's all business. I like that. But then she reads Kane's book and totally transforms into this creature who, because she knows the ending, feels manipulated and almost loses her purpose. And also there's that part where she eats Trent's car keys and then contortions herself into walking upside down with her head right side up. that shit's weird and I kind of don't know how to process it. It's funny and all, but yikes. Jürgen Prochnow as Sutter Kane. Jürgen was also in Judge Dredd, Das Boot, Dune, and I have to mention it, he was in Uwe Boll's House of the Dead, which, what a low, stupid artistry. I have no words. Sutter Kane is also an impossible kind of character. He's terrifying and funny all at the same time, as well as impossibly clever and maniacal in his plans. He's confident and supreme, and all will fall to the wayside because of his plan, and it's entertaining to watch John Trent try to run away from it. We have David Warner as Dr. Wren. I have to say that I know David as Captain Sawyer in the Horatio Hornblower TV movies, Mutiny and Retribution. My family grew up watching those and we adored them, and those two are a punishingly good pair of flicks, even made for TV. They're very gripping pieces of work. He was also in Tron, Star Trek 5 and 6, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and a whole slew of other things that I never saw. Lots of TV, lots of kid shows too, which is really neat. John Glover as Sapperstein. John Glover was also in Batman and Robin, Gross, Gremlins 2, and perhaps most notably, he was Lionel Luthor on Smallville. But that's not a movie, so who cares? Sapperstein himself is a weird dude. He seems a little too overeager to have John Trent staying in his hospital, but maybe he's like Dr. Chilton in the Hannibal stories, incompetent and eager to thrive on the success of other psychiatric professionals. Anyway, I don't like him. He comes across as creepy and uncaring, self-serving in his own position. Charlton Heston as Jackson Harglow. Where are you even supposed to begin when talking about Charlton Heston? Of course, there's Ben-Hur and Soylent Green, and Planet of the Apes and its sequel, and The Big Country, one of my mom's favorites, Midway. I think people forget about Charlton Heston. We like to think of Steve McQueen as a titan, legendary actor of Hollywood, but Charlton Heston is the king of the epic Hollywood movies of old, truly. His name is synonymous with classic films, with big power and grit. Even Clint Eastwood barely escapes from his shadow, if only for embracing the newer, grittier films of the 60s and 70s, and they were making movies at about the same time, too. Charlton Heston is always mentioned with an air of awe and remembrance and true staying power. John Carpenter tells of how, on set, Charlton Heston would regale the cast and crew with stories of the golden age of Hollywood, and they were all truly a captive audience. They adored him and his stories. That being said, there isn't a whole lot to say about this giant of a character, this monument to the old days. He's only in the movie for about 6 or 7 minutes total, but he's so cool, calm, and collected. Frankly, it's awesome that he's even in the movie. Frances Bay as Mrs. Pickman. Frances Bay is a familiar face to many, I'm sure, but I know her first and foremost from Happy Gilmore as Happy's grandmother, whose housing situation is basically the plot device for the entire movie. She's super sketchy and creepy as hell as Mrs. Pickman, and it's fun that her career is as diverse as it is. This movie was the final film of Wilhelm von Homburg, who starred in many action films, including Die Hard, but is most known for his role in Ghostbusters 2 as the nightmare-inducing villain Vigo. Seriously, still refuse to watch that one. Hayden Christensen as the Paperboy. This boy would grow up to be Anakin and to be terrible. But some of his later movies are actually pretty good, and so is he, like Takers. Jumper is also watchable. Jim Fife as Fan in Bookstore. I just wanted to point out Jim Fife is in this movie because he's also in another very good movie, The Frighteners. He plays Stuart, one of the ghosts. That's all. Things I liked. The credits say, animal action was monitored by the American Humane Association with on-set supervision by the Toronto Humane Society. No animal was harmed in the making of this film. Human interaction was monitored by the Interplanetary Psychiatric Association. The body count was high. The casualties are heavy. That's cool. I like when movies are self-aware and subtle about that kind of thing. When John Trent yells, "I'm not insane" at the hospital, prompting everyone else to join in, Dr. Sapperstein plays "We've Only Just Begun" by the Carpenters. I grew up with my parents listening to the Carpenters, so that was fun for me, and clearly John Trent wasn't a fan. I really like how things change in Hobbs' End as the horror progresses. The monster in the pool house is gone. The painting in the lobby evolves and the figures grow more grotesque. That's cool. It's cool. I like that they point that kind of thing out. I also want to mention some bits that make me laugh. When von Homburg's character says reality is not what it used to be, I'm pretty sure I've quoted that before without realizing that this was the movie I was quoting. When the fan in the bookstore approaches Trent and he says, "He sees you," and Trent is weirded out, understandably, and takes the non-confrontational route and just says, "Great, tell them I say hi." That shit's funny. That little girl with blood on her face from eating that dog's leg, seriously, and she looks up at Linda, claims she's her mommy, and then she says, "Do you know what today is? Today is Mommy's Day." It's horrifying and hilarious at the same time. Watch the YouTube clip. It's stupid good. When Trent is trying to escape his destiny of delivering Kane's book to society, and he's on that bus full of old people, suddenly Kane appears next to him, nonchalantly declares himself to be God, says to chill out, and then says, "Did I ever tell you that my favorite color was blue?" And then Trent wakes up, and the entire world around him is hardcore tinted blue. Not just a blue filter. Everyone is wearing blue clothes. Actual blue, like the production gave these actors the same exact clothes but in blue. Trent naturally screams in terror, freaking out everyone on the bus. It's really funny, and it's one of my favorite movie moments ever. Something worth noting, Deborah Hill, who's a frequent collaborator with John Carpenter, supported some notable filmmakers in her career who then went on to great success. The most notable among those, for instance, is James Cameron. No shit. And then, here's just some thoughts about the movie. In the Mouth of Madness was the movie where I realized I had a strange taste in movies. And not just in the, I like weird movies, because that's certainly true, but that there are specific things about weird movies that really get me and bring me back again. In the Mouth of Madness is a comedy. It is. But no one else thought it was funny. I remember audibly laughing when I first saw it at moments like the Carpenters playing over the PA at the psych ward, or the "Did I ever tell you my favorite color was blue?" And then I would grab my friends and say, "Hey, this movie is fun and actually a great horror movie. You should watch it." And they'd watch it, but they wouldn't laugh like I would laugh. They'd like the movie okay, but I expected them to react to the movie the exact same way I did. Now, part of that is because modern audiences equate scary with jump scares, which I think is the result of laziness in filmmaking and don't belong in film, at least not anymore. I had a similar experience with Return of the Living Dead, which is hilarious to me, but not to others. And that's even more of a comedy than In the Mouth of Madness. Honestly, it wasn't even until this year that I even fleshed out this thought that I found humor in weird movies. Return of the Living Dead is an actual comedy, but it doesn't quite play to your average American audience, but it certainly plays for me. It's goofy, almost slapstick, and I'm into it. In the Mouth of Madness, I think, is a little more absurdist, watching from the point of view of John Trent, a normal guy, a skeptic. We'd behave just like he would, trying to see through the smoke and mirrors and hidden speakers of Hobbs' End. He does everything he can to destroy Kane's book, like burning it one page at a time, but it keeps coming back. The movie, like the book, is impossible, and we're along for the ride. I'd also like to point out that when Sam Neill first read the script, he also thought it was a comedy, and that's part of what prompted him to even star in the movie, and he showed up and played it as if it were a comedy. I think part of the reason I love the movie as much as I do is that it really sums up my taste in movies so well. I love horror, but especially the horror of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's weird and gross and fun, and it doesn't rely on jump scares like it's the only kind of scare it knows. In the Mouth of Madness is more than a title, it's quite literally a descriptor, a location. It tells the audience where we are, seated right next to John Trent in the movie theater, right in the Mouth of Madness. We begin the movie at the cusp of insanity, and we dive in, attached at the hip, and then it's John Trent who joins us watching his own movie. In my first novel, I wrote, "We are all going," as the thoughts of the main character, with the double meaning that we are all dying and we are all losing our minds. In the Mouth of Madness embodies that perfectly. In John Trent's world, we are all losing our minds. It's just a matter of time. As Lydia puts it, reality is just what we tell each other it is. Sane and insane could easily switch places if the insane were to become the majority. Once you'd read the book, how can you be surprised? You're along for the ride. Shit, there's a lot of meta here. Anyway, the movie's descent into collective madness is the conclusion of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, which begins with one of my all-time favorite movies, The Thing, and then followed by Prince of Darkness, which has its moments but might be my least favorite John Carpenter movie. One of the feats of Carpenter's career is that he was able to make 3 movies about the end of the world, and they're all wildly different, and all of them wildly clever. An alien, discovering Satan's unfortunate living situation in a monastery, and a horror novelist whose work is divinely inspired from evil beings. This particular work is gripping. It's appropriately paced, never feels like it's dragging, and it's engaging. Carpenter spent months cutting and recutting the movie, and it certainly paid off. Even little moments that have the potential to feel boring, like checking into the Hobbs End Hotel, are more interesting because of what's off about the town. It's already strange enough that the town exists, and little landmarks from Kane's writing are there, but then there's the kids chasing the dog. Fuck those kids. Not to mention the painting in the lobby with people that transform into Lovecraftian creatures is surprising and creepy as shit. I mean, it's not completely surprising, it's John Carpenter, with a script that's basically directly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. It's the king of insanity and slimy creatures with tentacles, paired with the king of horror. And because Hobbs End is supposed to be a fictional, horrific town, the movie has free reign for any kind of absurd thing to happen. From the doors of the church opening and closing, 8 Dobermans just appearing from the side, and a little boy disappearing and being replaced by Sutter Kane himself, to terrible, terrible Mrs. Pinkman chopping up her husband into coleslaw. The movie is weird, and half the fun is John Trent reacting to things and giggling in the theater as his on-screen self yells about reality. It's drowning in the absurd, yet thriving at the same time. But it's the fun kind of absurd, not the too obscure to even have a good time absurd. I'm looking at you, Denis Villeneuve. You know what you did. Sutter Kane is crazy. Or is he? You want to think he is, but from the first 5 minutes when his agent attacks John at the coffee shop, and you see his dual irises, and you know that this is reality, sorry John, and everyone's in for a rough time, so even by the time they reach Hobbs End, and things get just a touch stranger, you already know it's going to go downhill, and you already know it's going to go downhill, and then John meets Kane, and he gives his speech about how his works have become real, that his work wasn't even his to begin with, that it was delivered by the old creatures behind the gigantic slimy wooden doors, locked with chains, and bulging as the monsters on the other side threatened to break through. Side note here, what could possibly make any door that slimy from the other side? Does that not damage the doors? They're wooden. Sure, it's not water, but doesn't any kind of intense moisture like that begin to destroy the wood and threaten the integrity of the wood? In the end, the doors don't even break. Kane tears them like they're paper from a book, which I suppose they are. Am I thinking too much about the fantastical elements here? Probably, but still couldn't help thinking about it. Maybe I'm too grounded in reality. It's an interesting play on the idea of being God, in the sense that I don't think people understand what that means, and just translating it to having lots of power. But even when Kane says, "I'm God now," and claims supreme deity, he tells John that the other ancient creatures, evil as they are, feed him his stories for him to create Hobbs End and the lesser monsters there. What a wild movie. Just shut up and enjoy it, will you? I'm talking to myself here. I'm down to watch this movie basically anytime, because every time I think about this movie, I think about John Trent waking up on the bus with that old lady and his entire world is tinted blue. I laugh to myself and think, yes, I could watch that entire movie just to get to that joke. In the Mouth of Madness is one of the greats by one of the greats. And if you're up for something a little bit different in the realm of horror, and it's only different because it's 2021 and we haven't had great horror in about 20 years, then I recommend giving this one a shot. It's fun, horrifying, and a good time. I'd also like to add that Ari Aster, the guy behind Hereditary and Midsommar, 2 amazing pieces of horror, points to In the Mouth of Madness as one of his favorite movies and a direct influence for his own work. John Carpenter will forever be a favorite director of mine. I actually bought his episode of The Director's Chair on Amazon Prime Video just to see him interviewed by Robert Rodriguez. I kind of hate him, and that's probably going to come up in a future episode. Definitely. He's a master of the craft, simultaneously handling the writing, filming, cinematography, and music production on his own, and his partner in horror, Deborah Hill. They're a magical duo that reinvented horror for the generation before mine. Who hasn't copied John Carpenter? No one. Even cross-genre with heartfelt sci-fi flicks like Starman, straight-up comedy like Big Trouble in Little China, he truly is the king, and I'm a fan. I'm only saddened that over the years he hasn't made any new films except The Ward in 2010, which was a disappointing entry in his body of work. In the Mouth of Madness is a fun vacation where the destination is insanity, and I'm along for the ride. Every time. 9 out of 10. Tell your mom about it. Don't forget, you can reply to this podcast with a voice message if you have the Anchor app, or you can send me an email at movielovershow@gmail.com if you want to request a movie be discussed, or hey, even co-host an episode. Either way, you'll probably wind up on the next episode of Movie Lover 22. Maybe. Maybe.